All right, we're live here. Jeff Campke here with Wealth Energetics. I have Marissa Cozzolino with me today from the Life 180 team. We're going to have a great conversation about wealth strategies and a lot of things financially. Get into both of our stories. Looking really forward to this conversation to just see what comes up, see how we can add some value, share some insights, share some, hopefully, some education with you guys. And we're going live on my channels, on her channels. So I'm here with Wealth Energetics. I focus on wealth strategies and the inner work that also accompanies that journey of growing yourself and your money, and love talking about concepts that relate to the inner work and bettering yourself, but also about wealth strategies and how we can make our money go further, get our money on purpose for what we're trying to accomplish, where it aligns with the things that are close to us, our goals, our values, our beliefs, and those kind of things. So let me welcome in Marissa. Thanks for joining me today, Marissa. I'll let you introduce yourself here as we roll along.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. Yes, my name is Marissa Cozzolino. I am with Life 180, and I've been in the industry for about 2 years now. And it's been a journey. I'm very grateful to be here and have the network that I do have. And, every day is a learning process and always learning things new.
I know it's totally. I was on a call earlier with a client and one of the team from Life 180 going over some things with annuities, and it's like, oh, yep, I just got this book in the mail a couple days ago. It's
Oh,
backwards, I guess, on here, but it's all about annuities because, like, yep, as you say, there's always things to learn and always ways to help better clients' situations and stuff. So, well, cool. Well, why don't you share a little bit about your background? I mean, you alluded to it, a couple years in the industry, but I'd love to hear, kind of what got you into the industry, like what made you change from what you were doing before, what, caught your attention, and what is it that you love about this industry and how you can help some people.
yeah, of course. So I was an esthetician from like 2016 to 2020. March 2020, everything shut down. And so I didn't have any work really because that industry completely shut down because we were working on people, we were very close contact with people. So I had some time on my hands to really figure out what I wanted to do. Because I knew I needed control over my income. It was like a very hard what am I going to say, like hard stop to working, right?
Mm.
Oh shoot, well what am I going to do, right? So the beauty industry, I really loved to make people feel good. I really love to help them and give them results. So I was like, well, what can I do to really control my income, control my schedule, and still provide that same feeling for people. So a few months went by and I tried a few things, and then I came across the insurance industry, and I haven't looked back. So I'm very grateful that I came across the life insurance industry. It's been really rewarding to be able to help people the way we do.
Yeah, totally. So I know one of the things that we talked about was before we were leading into this, some of your background and what you observed in the beauty industry that were some of the challenges that are just inherent with that, and probably a lot of businesses. So even if you're not, if you're watching this live or watching it back later, you might be in other businesses, but probably a lot of things that you saw in the beauty industry that were challenges that now oh, with my education around what to do with money differently, I can serve that audience and that type of business. So I'd love to hear some of what you observed from your time in that industry that were challenges financially for business owners, whether it was cash flow or other different things. And then like now what you see now from your new perspective, what how can you help them? How can you help move the needle for those types of businesses?
Yeah, I would say the number one issue in the industry or in the beauty industry is that we're not offered benefits. Like, we're not offered health insurance, life insurance, retirement plans. Like, even if I wanted a 401k, I was not offered it. And it wasn't something that was talked about. I think, the beauty industry in general as a whole, it's very like go, go, go. I would say it's like I worked for plenty of businesses where they did not care about their employees. So, with that being said, I guess I see why like the benefits side of things were never really talked about, never really brought up. And I was young. I was in like my young 20s. So to me, like stuff like that really didn't matter as long as I loved what I was doing. Um, so yeah, with businesses and like the cash flow side of things, it was difficult for them to manage, I would say. they they're startups, most of them, right? Unless if you work for a big corporation in the beauty industry, you're working for a startup. So plenty of problems depending on where you are at that time, you can definitely run into. But I would say the number one issue is definitely like no benefits and no discussion around benefits and how we're going to get them. And even in the beauty industry, there's a lot of self-employed entrepreneurs in that industry,
Mhm.
it's difficult for them to even get benefits. It's hard for them to shop around and find what fits them in their business.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, my background is in the lawn and landscape industry, and I think any of those kind of service-based industries, roofers, construction. I mean, I think it's pretty commonplace across a lot of industries, just being able to be competitive with, finding good employees because the really good employees are already with a company that can afford those benefits. And
Right.
so then you're kind of not always, but a lot of times, you're dealt with a different caliber of employee that can come in because they're maybe not at the stage of life or they're willing to accept a position just based on, an hourly rate or salary, and they're not actually trying to include benefits. Maybe they don't have a family yet or kids that they're worried about, health insurance and I think just a lot of it comes down to education. I mean, as we've been learning, a lot of people aren't even educated that they should be thinking about life insurance. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of narratives out there about whether it's good or bad, or whether it should be this type of insurance or whether it should be that type of insurance. So I think it can be, kind of confusing for employees to walk into some place and know that they should even be wanting, something like life insurance or other types of insurance that would be offered through an employer. So I guess if you now that you see this, have you been able to work with some people in the beauty industry and like, even just educating them, getting them to see the light bulb moments about some of their options? What's your experience been so far dealing with that and offering education and some solutions for them?
Yeah, it's been really rewarding. Because like you're saying, like life insurance is so versatile. Like, yes, it'll take care of your family when you're no longer here, but it can also be, your emergency fund, your opportunity fund. So I've had, the pleasure of showing other estheticians or beauty professionals on how policies like this can actually help fund their business and keep them going. And especially like I'm sure in your industry with lawn care services and stuff like that, we have to deal with buying materials, like it's an ongoing expense. So these policies like really do come in handy for them, especially like the self-employed. You always start self-employed and then eventually you build out your business. So um, helping the self-employed has really been super rewarding for me, for sure.
Mhm. Yep. And I think one of the things that I've seen, it may not be the first move that somebody would make getting into a business, right? I mean, cash flow is usually tight and you need to put that into capital for, whether that's building rental if you're in the businesses like the beauty industry, or equipment for construction or some of the trades. Like it's probably not the first thing you're going to do, but once you get cash flow coming in, then it's about how do we manage that cash flow? How do we be more efficient with those dollars? Because it's not just about, you know, paying a bunch of bills. It's looking at the expenses of a business and being, responsible with those dollars and how can I get them to go as far as I can. And I think one of the cool things that we've been learning from Life 180, and it's, come from other agency that I was with prior to, helping businesses not just with one piece and like the life insurance piece, which is very
Right.
foundational, but sometimes before we even get to that point, it's like, let's look at your cash flow. What are we doing with the money that maybe we can plug some leaks? If you know what Garrett Gunderson talks about in his book, actually all of his materials, but he talks about plugging cash flow leaks. And
Right.
there's a lot of places that businesses are leaking money that they can save money, minimize expenses, be more strategic. And if, I think a couple low hanging examples off the top of my head is, insurance premiums on, liability insurance, or like in our industry now, E&O insurance, or, if you have business auto, any of those kind of insurances, if you're paying monthly, you're paying more for like a service fee every month. And if you did that calculation as like a percentage, like an interest cost, I mean, a lot of times it can be more than you think, of an actual interest cost. And if you don't have to do that, if you have some cash flow to pay, quarterly or semi-annual or annually, that's more money in your pocket.
Hmm.
And that's just getting more efficient with those dollars. It's the same amount of coverage, but if it costs you, maybe $250 less for the year, that's $250 that you can do other things in your business. And it might be, maybe not just that alone, but if you're doing some things on the tax saving side, which, we don't do that directly, but there's a lot of things that businesses don't do. That's something I found a lot, Marissa, that businesses, especially self-employed people, they're still running their taxes as if they were a W-2 employee. They don't realize that having a business entity and being able to take many, many times more deductions legally through the IRS code as a business owner can make such a big difference in their finances. And that savings then can be something that you can look at contributing to a cash value life insurance policy in the way that we would do it for those benefits that you're mentioning, the liquidity, the death benefit protection. And, I think the death benefit protection, I'd be interested to hear your perspective on this. For a business owner, what do you think are the different perspectives and the different responsibilities of having a business and making sure that if something happened to you, especially if you have employees, that the business can continue to go on without you, or there's at least a succession plan for maybe a partner to buy out, and the life insurance is that key piece that allows that to happen financially. Or I'd be interested to hear, kind of your perspective on that with the death benefit portion of life insurance when it comes to a business owner.
Yeah, I mean, just like you said, like what's going to happen when you're not here? You know what I mean? Like your whole business can fall apart. And whoever's there to handle the rest of the pieces, like I can't imagine the amount of headaches it would leave without something in place, right? So even like, yes, you could leave a death benefit behind for them to continue the business, but also that death benefit could allow them to be like, okay, maybe I don't want to keep this business and I can just let it go, but financially be okay, not scrambling around trying to find, a buyer for the business, right? Like it gives them that financial piece to not make such a like excuse me, such a hasty decision with the wrong person, right? Like if you're going to sell a business and get rid of it, like you at least want to make sure that it's with the right person to continue the succession of the business. I really doubt that people want to sell their business and they're like, yeah, go burn it to the ground, you
Right.
know. So I think yes, it gives them that financial cushion to continue the business the way it is, or maybe even improve it however they want to. But it also gives them that financial piece that, okay, let me find the right buyer for my business so it can, like, I can actually see it flourish if I don't want to keep it.
Yep, I agree totally. One thing that I'm thinking of that along these lines is, what if you have a business and maybe you're a few years into your business and maybe, if it's equipment or, and I know some chiropractors that when they get into the chiropractic business, for them to buy like an x-ray machine can
Right.
be a significant investment. A lot of times they're leasing that equipment and it's a big dollar amount that is required to have that. Well, if
Yeah.
you passed away unexpectedly and you still owe $50,000, $100,000 on equipment, and that could be,
Right.
a chiropractor, it could be a landscaper or a construction person. And you have, $70,000 skid steers and whatever all the different equipment is, trucks, and it's not paid off, and you don't have a way to pay that off. Then, like, the spouse would be responsible for trying to sell that stuff off. Depending on the market, like maybe the used car market. If you owe $40,000 on a heavy duty truck, can you
Right.
get $40,000 out of it, or maybe you get $30,000 to sell it because the used car market's down, right? And I know right now we're in a cycle where the car market is starting to go backwards a little bit. I was looking earlier on the agent panel live that we did with Chris. I was looking at some things before that on the consumer price index, and everything was going up inflationary wise,
Hmm.
except for new cars and used cars. Used cars are down almost 10%. Um, and with what's going on right now. So, those are things to think about if you're a business owner and you have, the capital outlay into equipment or a building or different things that, if you owe debt on that, what's your plan to make sure that doesn't crush the remaining family that would inherit that business or business partner? And those are all things that, a lot of times we don't think about.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, what the core of what we're doing is still life insurance, and those are harder discussions sometimes to have or for get clients to think about. But it's
Right.
so important, especially even at the family level. I mean, if you're leaving a lot of debt to a spouse if you passed away, like how do you want that to go? And that's one of the things that we get to coach clients through of like, okay, what do you want this picture to look like? I mean, it's not a fun thing to think about, but let's
Yeah.
put in the time now and make a plan that it might not be perfect in the beginning, but we can build towards that over time so that the protections are there. And we're thinking about all these contingencies and making sure that you're not, you know, wiping somebody out financially and setting them back a decade because of the debt or bankruptcy or bad credit or something like that. But it's a very vital piece, especially when it comes to business owners, and something that, on the surface, you start a business, it's all about, cash flow, finding clients, finding customers, maybe it's hiring good employees, and your focus gets put on that. I think that's one of the assets that we bring to the table, of helping clients to see the rest of the picture of as being a business owner. What important elements are there that are often overlooked that can be really crippling? And that's the whole point of insurance, is to take care of you during the unexpected things so that you're not at risk.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's funny that you bring that up because like thinking about like all the equipment you brought up, like in the beauty industry, I was working with some heavy duty laser hair removal machines, and I don't know how much exactly they cost, but I'm pretty sure they cost a pretty penny.
Hmm.
And I know they were financed. So yeah, that is something to think about. The equipment that's in within your business, like that all holds debt too. So that's a really great point that you brought up.
Hmm. Yeah, it's just so important to think about those things. And I find a lot of the financial advice out there from different, we call them kind of financial entertainers, and sometimes their advice is solid, sometimes it may be a little bit skewed with certain agendas behind the scenes, right? But I think one of the things that happens is, a lot of times, even if you're sitting down with a financial advisor, or somebody like us, that they're thinking in terms of best case scenario all the time. Like, well, your portfolio is going to grow by this much. You're going to have this many millions of dollars at retirement, and you won't need life insurance because you're going to be self-employed. And it's like, well, but what if all those things don't go perfectly? And on the business side, what happens if my business doesn't grow at the pace that I think? Or what happens if there's another COVID and our businesses are shut down for a long period of time, and your cash flow goes to zero and you lose most of your clientele? And, like,
Yeah.
planning for those unforeseen contingencies that may happen. I mean, you have family members that get ill, you have car accidents, you have, things that come up, you need a new water heater, a new roof, and, having a plan to get you through worst case scenarios, and not just assuming that the markets are always going to go up, my portfolio is going to grow this amazing amount, I'm going to live this lavish retirement. Like, well, let's not assume that everything's going to go perfectly. Then
Right.
what can we do to kind of backtrack from that ideal scenario and say, okay, well, what happens if you can't invest at the level that you want? What happens if, you have a disability and you can't work as much? Or what happens if there's a divorce and you have child support? Or, like, there's all kinds of things that people deal with on a day-to-day basis. All you have to do is read the comment section of a Dave Ramsey post, and you find out how much trouble people are in, and some of the advice given doesn't give them protection or give them a strategy to handle the situation they're in, because they were betting on everything going flawlessly, and it
Mhm.
didn't happen that way. And I think that's one of the powerful things that, in the right situation, a life insurance policy, not just the death benefit portion, but the access to capital
Right.
inside of a life insurance cash value, can be so instrumental with a business owner in particular. If they get into a tight spot, and depending on the strategy you're using the cash value for, that can be a place you can go grab some money to maybe get you through a tight spot. And the more cash value you have available, and obviously for any business owner, you're not going to start day one with this huge cash value. It would be something you'd build towards, but it's very doable, especially with businesses that have high cash flow. It's very easy to have a strategy and a plan to direct cash flow into cash value, and have something there for those worst case scenarios. So any thoughts around those?
No, I mean, I completely agree with you on everything. Yeah, I kind of have no, I mean, you put it in the best words. So,
All
yeah,
right, cool.
saying like fill the financial gaps that, excuse me, fill the financial gaps that could possibly, happen, like you're
Mhm.
saying, it's not things that we want to think about, but I'm sure when those things come up, you wish you put a plan in place to protect yourself. So, that's what I love to do for clients as well. Like make sure that plan is in place before the unforeseen arises.
Mhm. Yep. So let me ask you this, kind of along these lines. If you've had some observations with, there's something called Parkinson's law in the world of finance, and it's kind of a universal law. And I always joke, when I first heard this law, I was like, oh, that's totally me in high school, where you have a project due maybe at the end of the month or at the end of the semester or something, and it's like a day or two out when it's due, and you like really start getting busy. You didn't really think
Yeah.
about it or touch it until that point. And so Parkinson's law is that, like, whatever the capacity is, you'd like utilize that capacity. So when it comes to money, it's, if you make 100 grand a year it's like natural for humans, especially in America, to think, how can I spend all the 100? And
Yeah.
sometimes we think even more than that. Like we can go in debt and spend more than that. And so that's that Parkinson's law. So have you seen in your experience where business owners get caught up in that, where they don't have a plan for their cash flow, and as their cash flow increases, they still seem to be stuck on this like figurative financial hamster wheel where they're not getting further ahead, even though their books say that they're making more money, but somewhere money's like evaporating out of thin air. Have you seen that? And how do you help with some of that?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I haven't been able to personally help a client that way, but I have seen it as an employee working
Mm-hmm,
for, whenever I was a W-2 employee. So I don't really know like what exactly was going through their situation because I didn't know the details, but
mm-hmm,
like my personal experience of something like that is just being young and naive and not being smart with your money. Um,
mm-hmm,
so I'm just grateful that now I have the knowledge to do better, but I also feel like there is a knowledge gap in Americans. Like I just don't think there's enough financial literacy or the right financial literacy so people actually know what to do with their cash to, achieve their life goals.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I know that's one of the things we wanted to talk about was the younger generations. I think it's a good segue into that. Like, I'd be interested to hear what are some of the things that you would want to teach the younger crowd and help them learn that isn't taught in school, isn't taught in college, doesn't seem to be real popular to learn anywhere else. What would be some, a top three or top five? I don't know how many you've got, but what would be that list of things that you'd like to instill in the younger generation so that they do learn how to handle money and grow wealth in a productive way?
I think, well, my number one thing is that I believe we all need to think about retirement at like no matter what age you're at, because that wasn't really brought into like to my attention until I, got into this industry. So I feel like I'm late in the game. So if I could bring that education to the younger generations, it's a difficult question to even think about, as a young person, like, because we don't really know what we're doing. We don't know what we want to do for the rest of our lives. We don't know if we're getting married, if we're not getting married. You know what I mean? Um,
Hmm.
but it's definitely something to think about, especially in today's economy with inflation. Like, we have to be smart with our money. We have to be able to find plans that put us ahead. So then when you do actually solidify your life goals, maybe as years go on and you go into your late 20s, late 30s, or early 30s, you actually have that liquidity and that accessibility to fund whatever you want to do. Um,
Hmm.
because yeah, I feel like no one's talked to me about that until like, until I got into this. I was like, oh, maybe, yeah, that's important to do,
Hmm.
so that's like my number one goal is to definitely like educate the younger generation and people younger than me or people around my age to really plan for retirement and emergencies. I think it's really important to plan for emergencies because I didn't know I wasn't going to have a job in March 2020. They were like, all right, see you in 4 days. And then I never saw anybody again. So that was it was a different time. And I go back to that and I'm like, wow, imagine if I had, just a cash value life insurance policy at that time.
Hmm.
Like my options could have been a little bit different at that time. So I think that's important too, just preparing for emergencies. We don't want emergencies to happen, but they do happen. So
Hmm.
I think that's very important too.
Yeah, I agree totally. I was been doing some work around annuities, like I mentioned earlier on, with a couple clients, and I've been learning from a few gurus in the industry. Tom Hegna is one of them. He's kind of a life insurance and annuity expert, and talking about the retirement side of it. And I just did a video last night on my YouTube channel talking about some of the things that we aren't taught around retirement. And we're always taught to accumulate, right? You just put money away, accumulate, accumulate, accumulate. And that accumulation of this huge pile of money is going to solve all your problems. You're going to be what they call self insured. So it means you don't need life insurance because you got this huge pile of money that if something happened to you, that replaces your income and your family's good. You don't need long term care because you've got this huge pile of money and that'll cover all of your long term care needs and any nursing home needs that you may have. And it's like, well, that might be true, but
Mm.
is it the best use of those dollars? Are those dollars in that huge pile of money being used the most efficient way? And that's
Right.
something that doesn't get asked. Are there more efficient things? And what we've learned in the life insurance and annuity space is they've done a lot of deep research into this, and they found that when you have a balanced portfolio, we're not saying don't put money in the market, but also have guaranteed income sources and what we call a volatility buffer, which was a lot of times can be the cash value in life insurance, where if you have a mutual fund or you have a 401k and the market goes down 20, 30, 40%, which happens usually about every 10 years or so, if you're trying to withdraw money out of that account for your retirement, you need $50,000 a year, and then your account also drops by 20% that year. That's like a double dip in the negative. So if you have a volatility buffer, the cash value to pull from, you don't have to withdraw that 50,000 out of your 401k or your mutual fund. You can let the dip happen because it's going to happen unless you have a strategy to convert to cash or something like that. But you can let that happen and you're not at least double dipping against that account. You can let that account rebound because you've got other monies to pull from sources that won't affect your taxes, that
Right.
won't, do that. It's liquid. And a lot of times the money inside of a life insurance policy, I know the studies that I've done on this personally, where I run illustrations and look at it, comparing a 401k and the taxation that would occur if you were to use that as an income vehicle in retirement. If you put equal dollars into a life insurance policy, excuse me, not put equal dollars in, get the same amount of income out of it, you'd usually need about 70, 75% of the balance in your 401k in cash value life insurance. So if you have $1 million 401k, you might only need 700, 750,000 of cash value in a life insurance policy to give you the same net income in retirement.
Wow.
And that can be a big, powerful thing because that's efficiency of money. That's for $1, I need 25% less dollars in my big pile of money to give me the same result of income in retirement. And that's because a lot of it has to do with the taxation benefits of it. So there's definitely things around retirement that certainly aren't taught to the people that are 50 and 60 getting ready to enter that. But
Yeah.
then, yeah, the younger generation, it's like they're not even thinking about that. That's
Right.
not, it should be college courses, it should be high school courses to get people prepared for that and even on the right track to even starting things while they're at that stage. Because money grows by compound interest. So the earlier you start, the better it's going to be in the long term. And you're not going to need as much money because you've got money working longer for you, which is just to your betterment. Instead of starting when you're 40, when you're actually mature and wise and realize I'm behind the eight ball. I should have started 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And I think, I'll tell a little bit about my story. I know when I was that age, when I was in my mid 20s, I had made a lot of money in different businesses and, had jet skis and new trucks and blah, 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 blah. And at the time after that, my wife and I had gotten married and we were in an accident where we were hit on foot by a car down in Florida. And, it turned our world upside down. And, coming out of that, we were in a lot of debt because we lived on credit cards for a year because neither one of us could really work. I could work eventually, but, my wife was not able to work for quite a while. And it was like coming out of that, like, what do you do around money? Because I felt very, just kind of screwed with money because like I need to make all this money to pay off debt. I need to make all this money just to put food on the table and provide for our family. And shortly after that, we had our son like a year and a half later. And, so then it's like, okay, I got to take care of my son, I got to take care of my wife. But then I also need to do the retirement thing. I need to be planning for that. And it was like, I almost needed to earn 3 times as much money to get to that point. It felt so overwhelming. And I think part of the reason young people have a hard time doing that is because they don't have the income and the cash flow to think about, especially now with inflation, food's costing more, gas costs more, vehicles cost more, just everything costs more. So where's that discretionary income going to come in that's going to be allocated to starting to fund a retirement account, in your 20s? A lot of times the
Right.
math doesn't work out very well. And I
Yeah.
know for me, that was one of the things that the cash value life insurance came in and was when I first heard that message, just as a customer, it was like, this is exactly what I'm looking for because I can have money that I don't lose control over for 30 or 40 years. Because I think that was, as a youngster, like, there might be things I want to do with that money along the way. I don't want to just put it in some account, that's stored in some shelf somewhere. That was my perception at the time. Like they put
Right.
all your money in like this vault in the bank or something, and somehow it grows. Like I didn't have any idea back then, and so it's like, but maybe I want to do something with that money along the way, but not at the same time be irresponsible when it does come to my retirement planning. How could I do both? And
Right.
that's where the infinite banking or the cash value life insurance for me, fit that bill exactly because I could do multiple things with the same dollars. And that just comes down to efficiency. So I could solve problems today. I'm solving problems for my retirement, and it's all with the same instrument. And I don't have to have multiple financial gurus. I didn't have to have multiple financial accounts. Like it was all under one roof. So I think those are some of the things that, I would say for young kids, that's the reason why. But then, how do you convince them to do that, right? I mean, that's a whole other thing to tackle. How have you had some conversations with young people where you're able to kind of break through that and get them to see the light a little bit? How has that gone for you?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I just talked about this on my Instagram live. It's important to like adapt to the client. It's all about the client, you know what I mean? So we have to figure out what their life goals are, what their situation is to really understand how they're going to use the policy. And that's how we can design it, right? And I've also talked with them about like this teaches you like financial discipline. Like you should want to, with the amount of benefits that whole life cash value whole life insurance offers, you should want to constantly contribute to it. I mean, it gets me excited every time. Every time I could put more towards my policy, I get excited. So, just to have that aspect where you're not only saving in a savings account at the traditional bank, but you have all these other benefits, it should get you excited for the future and just teach you that discipline. Like you said, as a young person, like it's hard with the day to day and the inflation, and we all need more money than we're probably making. So it is difficult to have that discipline and to contribute to a policy and to kind of have like the vision of a bigger picture, not just like today or now, but have that bigger picture and focus on your life goals. Like kind of think about what your premium is going towards every time you're paying it, right? Or every time you're contributing to your policy. I think that's very important. So that's what I try to focus on with my clients. Like focus on the bigger picture, focus on the discipline, the financial discipline that you're going to gain from it. And then the benefits you're going to reap. If you're not reaping them now, you're going to reap them later on, especially as you grow as a person and achieve your life goals, whether that's marriage or owning a business or buying a car, buying a house. Like all those things should get you excited. So that's what I really focus on with my clients.
That's cool. I think the discipline piece, with you bringing that up, I think that in so many financial conversations that we have with other agents here at Life 180 or whether it's with Chris directly, I think ultimately most of those conversations come over to like some of the inner work, some of the things that you have to do that aren't just what you're doing with your money. You have to have the habits and the discipline, like you said, the motivation to be able to handle yourself as an adult.
Yeah,
We all do have our stumbling blocks with things. And I think that's a necessary component is getting your head on straight and getting yourself like understanding yourself and where are your weak spots. And then if you
right,
have those weak spots around spending or not being able to keep a budget or, whatever that looks like, there's a lot of things that we can get into. Right. And,
right.
having a way to manage that and a way to overcome those if that's a deficiency for you. That's where things like what you're saying, Marissa, that's where we come in and we can help with that because we're another set of eyes. We can be a mentor. We can offer support and that kind of thing to help do that and offer a plan because sometimes it's just a lack of plan that can be the difference between somebody you know being able to execute on things themselves or not. And if we can show them a roadmap and a plan like, hey, do this, do this, do this, for a lot of people, that's all they need. They just need that direction, that compass on like, this is what I need to do. And then once you show them that, they can execute that. And then their discipline does go up. And then they're taking those right action steps with their money. And that's just such a foundational thing. I think I'm a sports fan from like the I grew up in Michigan, so Tom Brady went to U of M 40 minutes down the highway, and
Nice.
he always talked about mental toughness. That was what he always talked about, and it just carries over into every area of life, sports and not, like just being able to be mentally tough and having the discipline to set a certain amount of money aside.
Yeah.
And maybe it's enough discipline to grow your income, to learn that are going to leverage your income. Because I think that's part of the discussion in today's world. Like we've already talked about, everything's costing more. So,
Hmm.
if you're a W-2 person, trying to increase your income to keep up with inflation is going to be probably a little challenging. So that's where I think a lot more people are starting to look at side hustles, network marketing, starting their own business. And
Yeah.
being an entrepreneur, I've heard many people talk about how that's like can be very deep spiritual work on yourself because of who you have to develop into. I think that goes back to the discipline, and it may just mean the discipline to study sales, the discipline to study marketing, the discipline to, you know, whatever it is, if it's a skill, or a trade, learning those things to increase your skills, learning how to be, create the culture at a company so you can bring in good employees. Like those are all skill sets, and having the discipline even to do those can mean a direct impact on your bank account. And I know Garrett Gunderson's one of them that talks quite a bit about, it's easy to talk about rate of return, and I'm going to put money in this investment, and that investment's what's going to earn me, the compounding interest, and my account's going to grow because of that rate of return. But we never think about the rate of return on us. And if we direct those disciplines to bettering ourselves, what is the direct impact on our business, on our bottom line, and our company if we are better, at what we do and better with the attributes of being a business owner? Sometimes you can go learn marketing and you could double your income in a year or two. Obviously no promises there, but that's frequent. If you have a good course and a good mentor, and you implement it, you follow the recipe for success. Like that's something that can actually happen for people, and that dwarfs any rate of return from a mutual fund or anything like that, or chasing Bitcoin jacking through the roof. So I think those are some things that I see around disciplines. I'm glad you brought that up because it's such a foundational thing, I think, for anybody to be financially successful. You talk to the Grant Cardones and a lot of these very, very wealthy people, and they talk about the discipline to be able to do the right things every single day, in and out, no matter what they feel like doing, they just do them anyway. And it comes to, like you're talking about with retirement and younger people, like finding that discipline to be able to put money aside and to plan for that and stick to it. And not that you can't ever get off course, but to be able to get back on track when life events do happen is all key. So some really good points there. Anything you want to add on that, like some of the other attributes that you might see as far as like discipline, anything else that's things that people need to sometimes overcome to be able to plan for retirement as a youngster?
Um, I mean, I think those are like the major point. It's really because, with just thinking about a young person, and, I talk to all different types of young people, right? But majority of them, they love to party. They love
Mm,
to spend their dollars on partying. And excuse me, what I will say as well is that, like you said, with Bitcoin and stuff like that, I think a lot of young people, they're looking for the next new thing to gain wealth instantly. Like they want to go viral. They want to have $1 million in their bank account tomorrow. And I think that goes back to, just focusing on the big picture of things. Like things don't come quickly. And as an entrepreneur, I mean, we both know it's not an easy road. A lot of entrepreneurs say that. If you study all the big entrepreneurs, they all have their own struggles. So if you're really looking to, gain or accumulate wealth in your life, honestly, whatever comes fast can go fast. So
mm,
I think that's important too for young people because we live in, a world where everything is instant, even with internet, I'm sorry, even with internet, we're just so used to the instant gratification because we have everything at our fingertips.
mm,
Accumulating wealth and building your foundation and preparing for retirement, it's all like a lifestyle. It's kind of like fitness. I feel like I talk about this a lot on my content, but it is really like fitness. You have to put in the reps, whether you see the result or you don't see the result. You have to eat right, whether you see the result or don't see the result. And that's exactly how, you know, um, your financial life is. You just have to make the right steps to have the right income, or not income, but outcome. That's what I meant.
outcome, yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
I think there can work, but yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. I think those are all important things that you need to take into account. And I think it's interesting. Do you have kids, Marissa?
I don't, not yet.
You don't? Okay. So we've got a couple younger ones. I mean, 5 and almost 9. But it's
Oh,
interesting, like the younger generation, because like our son, he tends to kind of have that instant gratification. He doesn't want to put in the hard work. He doesn't want to,
yeah,
stick at stuff. He wants things just to happen now. Dad, can you help me build a Lego set? Or
yeah,
whatever. And it's like, well, that's going to take time. It might take several days to do that. And usually 2, 3 days in, he loses interest. And it's very much interesting. And this is a much deeper conversation than we'll even get into. But I'm always look at that like, the next generation comes in and kind of, they just seem like they come out of the womb thinking that way, like all of them do, or like a vast majority of them do. And it's always like, is that just a result of like the generation before them and like what they went through? Or
Right.
is it like, the next generation that's coming up, the way that they see things, is that like the way that we need to move to come up with systems that do give us more, and I want to say instant gratification all the time, because obviously that's not a great thing to just get used to everything showing up the minute you need it. But to me, it could be a balance of like, okay, well, maybe we do need to think things differently. Maybe there are ways to at least maybe meet in the middle, maybe not work 40 years for it, and it's not going to show up this week, but shorten the time down. And I feel like, I don't even feel like, I know with what we're doing, or even around just life insurance and the efficiencies that alone can give you, that kind of does that. It
Right.
does make it to where you don't have to just struggle at a job you hate for 40 years, putting
Right.
all this money away, eating rice and beans and peanut butter and jelly every day just to try to live this great retirement, but knowing it ain't going to show up tomorrow because Bitcoin's going to go to $100,000 and you're just going to be able to retire at age 25. Like
Right.
somewhere in between, but we can collapse the time
Yeah.
and make what could be a 40-year plan into a 5 or 10-year plan. Like that can happen. And so I think what we're doing does ultimately fit really well with the younger generation and what they're seeking. And we just have to convey that, like educate them on how do we collapse that time down? How is it that through life insurance we can, be more efficient with our money, and not just through life insurance, other, things like I already talked about, being more efficient with taxes and insurance and those types of things, and increasing your income. Like all those things can shorten the time down, but you need a plan and a strategy structure of what to do with all that in order to get the outcome of being more financially independent in 5 or 10 years or 15, whatever your situation is. But I think the older generations, like I think of like my parents and my grandparents, where it was, I live here in Michigan, so it was like farming, and it was, a lot of hands-on laborious work. And
Hmm.
that was like the way that you're instilled to work for your money, and it's always trading time for money. And I think what we can bring to the table is getting your money to work more for you, and
Yeah.
then you're not needing to trade your time for money as much, right? You can slowly
Exactly.
work out of that. There's a lot of ways you can get into that, right?
Hmm.
We're obviously not trying to pitch investments. We're not investment advisors on that, but there's ways to put your money to work
Right.
so that you are more what the new generations coming in is like. How can we do this quickly? How can we do it faster? And it won't be instant, but it could be where you could be retired by age 40 because you've done the right moves through your 20s, through your 30s. You've been smart, you've put money away, and there's a lot of ways you could have money coming in passively because you did the right things, and you don't have to work till you're 65. You can enjoy life now. And I think that's
Right.
kind of more the energy that the new generation is coming out with. Like, let's enjoy a little bit more. Let's do the partying. And obviously, there's a responsibility that comes with that and a maturity.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like, let's enjoy the people we're around. Let's do our hobbies. Let's go
Yeah.
golfing. Let's go out with the girls and get our nails done. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
let's not suppress that lifestyle for 40 years. And then when you're 65, go all out with your girlfriends at that point and complain about your hips and knees hurting and all that. Like, let's do something different. So, any thoughts around that whole concept? Because I think that's a big thing. There's a shift, right now of like, let's think about retirement differently and not just make it a marker that's at age 65. Let's do some different things now to get there sooner and live a different life.
Yeah, I think I'm a millennial, so I think as a millennial, we've watched our parents work very, very hard, and maybe our parents aren't the happiest, like maybe they love what they do, but they really don't love having to wake up early, go to the office 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And we all know the weekends go by super quick. So I think that's what drove at least my generation to want to live that type of lifestyle where we can retire at 40 or can retire as early as possible so we're healthy to enjoy our lives.
Mhm.
So I think that was like a driving factor, for our generation where we've watched our parents work very hard, and we've also seen, nowadays we've seen older people struggle, like you go into supermarkets and, Walmart and Target and stuff like that, and you see these older people working. And I think we all know that the system that we were designed to follow, um, kind of leads us down that way, and that's not where we want to go.
Mhm.
So you just talking about building in your 20s and 30s, like we talk about with the cash value whole life insurance. That's our foundation, and so is building in your 20s and 30s. Like, that's your foundation to be able to enjoy life at an early retirement age, and to be able to actually live your life the way you want. I think a lot of people are looking for that freedom and not having to be so tied down to like a specific schedule and having to show up somewhere, and they just
Mhm.
want that freedom. I think that's all. Even it could be financial freedom that they want, but I really truly think that a lot of people want freedom. They just want to live their life the way they want to live their life, and have no stress. Like, who wants the stress?
Yeah.
So I really think if that's what you want, then you need to, like you're saying, sooner rather than later, you have to start building these plans, so then you can actually enjoy life sooner.
Mhm. I was watching, I think it was a excuse me, Caleb Williams and Tom Hegna interview, I think is where I heard it.
Hmm.
And they were talking about kind of what you're saying there, where, living life through your working years and getting to the point where you maybe don't need to work all the way to your 65, and like doing that differently. And the amount of people, and it's not like a high percentage, but there's enough people that they live that, scaled back lifestyle through their working years, trying to accumulate that big pile of money to be put away for retirement. And they don't
Hmm.
even make it to retirement, or maybe a year or two in and they pass away, or they have like a major illness or something like that. And I mean, it happens. I've heard of numerous stories like that. And, you have to ask yourself, and this is something that Garrett Gunderson talks quite a bit about, is, are you living now? Because if you're just going to live that someday syndrome, where someday I'll get to that, someday I'll travel, someday I'll do this, like, that's not the point of life. The point of life is to live. Obviously, you have to be responsible. Obviously, you have to plan, but, planning in such a way where you can enjoy your money now, but you're not also just screwing yourself out of a retirement. And I think that's where some of the financial strategies and tools come in. And I know the particular interview I was watching with Tom Hegna, he's talking about like annuities and even your investment portfolio. A lot of people think, well, I want to build this big pile of cash, but then I'm just going to live off the interest. And the idea is to build it so big you can just live off the interest. And, I don't know if you've gotten into this too much, but there's something called the safe withdrawal rates when it comes to retirement income. And a lot of times historically it's been around 4%. Years ago it was even higher than that, but where interest rates are at right now, the experts say anywhere from 2 to 4% of your balance in your account you should be pulling every year. So if you have $1 million portfolio, which, a lot of people think like I've arrived if I have $1 million portfolio, but if you have a traditional account, you're going to be pulling 4% of that, which is $40,000, but that's pre-tax.
Right.
So then you're living on maybe $30,000 after tax. You're a millionaire on paper, but living on $30,000. And so the whole idea is, maybe let's look at that all differently. If we have different structures in place, like where Tom Hegna talks about having life insurance as what's going to transfer to the next generation,
Mm.
whatever that number is that you want to go to them, a million or a quarter million or whatever that number is. And then your investment portfolio, or if you have annuities that are producing income or social security, like all those things coming in, you can spend down that $1 million portfolio maybe a little more aggressively and enjoy the money that you've worked for and enjoy your life, not thinking, well, I can't touch this pile because it has to last me till I'm 90 or 95 if I live that long. And I think it's looking at all this differently and thinking like, we have one life. You're not guaranteed tomorrow. I mean, I've
Yeah.
had the accident my wife and I had. We could have easily been taken out at age 20. We weren't even 28 at the time. Like, it could have happened.
Wow.
I just lost my dad earlier in the year on Valentine's Day. He passed at 66. Like,
Yeah.
if you asked him, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, he would have probably told you to be around for another 5 or 10 years, maybe 20, who knows? So you
Yeah.
just don't know. So like, why put it off when, you could enjoy life more, enjoy the money you're making, and obviously don't go out of bounds with it. Don't go buy a Lamborghini and all kinds of stuff, but travel a couple times a year with the grandkids or your children. Like, that's something that we've tried to make a conscious effort of like, let's still enjoy life. Let's still enjoy the money that we're making. We're working very hard for it. Yes, we want to plan ahead, but
Yeah.
let's not sacrifice the memories and the moments and the connection with the people who are close to us. Like, let's make sure that we keep that there and don't get to the end of like our children, like my wife was saying the other day, like we've only got 9 more summers with our son and he'll be graduated high school and who knows, maybe move away. Like life is precious, life is short. Like live in the moment and, take that time with people.
Definitely. No, definitely. I agree. I was just going to say that, like, you can't think of like you're going to live to 90. Like, we really don't know. Like, we don't have, I think I saw a video of, who was it? I forgot who it was, but she was on a talk show host, on a talk show, and she said, we don't have expiration on our booties, which is true. We don't have, oh, I think it was Whoopi Goldberg. I think it was Whoopi Gold. She said we have expiration dates on our booties, which is the truth. And so I totally agree with you. I mean, excuse me, being entrepreneurs, we're constantly like trying to get to our next goals, trying to advance the business, right? But I think I totally agree with you. I think you do have to take time to slow down, create the memories, enjoy the life that you're building, and just be proactive about building your wealth at the same time. I think that's what it all comes down to.
Yeah, you made me think of an additional point I've heard from many places, like when your kids get older, like, I'm right now like building businesses and, doing my thing, and it's easy to get like immersed in that.
Yeah.
And they're like, your kids won't remember that you worked hard. They're going to remember that you were absent. And I think that's a big thing that's hit me, like, especially after my dad passed, of like, I wish I had more time with him. I wish I wasn't working so hard where I could have, went out to breakfast with my dad once a week or once a month or something and just spent
Yeah.
more quality time and built a stronger connection. Because at the end of the day, like, the physical stuff doesn't matter. Like at the end of the
Right.
day, it's the people in your life, the people you care about, the people you love, and what can you do to have more of that time. And I think you spoke earlier about the freedom, and a lot of people are after freedom, and the financial freedom can give you time freedom and choice freedom. That you're not. Garrett Gunderson always talks about financial freedom or financial independence, and his definition is money isn't the sole or number one consideration when you're thinking about shall I do something or go somewhere. The first thought isn't, well, I don't have enough money to go on vacation, or I can't afford to purchase that. Like when you're financially independent, that's not the first thought that comes up. It still may be something you consider. It still be maybe something you want to obviously be responsible with, but it may not be, the first thing. And I think that's a really cool place to be at, that I think many people are working towards, and that's something that we can obviously help accelerate that whole process. So any
Definitely.
more thoughts or anything else you want to, any questions for me you want to ask? But I know we're here coming up on an hour, so I wanted to.
I know it went by fast. It went
It
by.
does. It always does.
Well, yeah, I did want to ask you, like, what keeps you going? You know what I mean? Because, like,
Mm.
being an entrepreneur is not the easiest. We have our ups, we have our downs. So I guess, yeah, like, what's the driving factor? Like, what keeps you in the business and keep going?
It's a really good question. So I think for me, I've always had like this for a long time early on in my life, grade school and maybe just after. I kind of knew what I wanted, but I didn't know exactly what that was. And I had my last day of senior year, I had a history teacher that came around, and like every student, he just like talked to him for a minute or two, said some things, whatever, and like, probably compliments or whatever. But what he said to me was, Jeff, you know what you want out of life, you just haven't found it yet. And I remember at 18 years old, it was like, that's kind of cool. I maybe kind of get what he's saying, but not really.
Hmm.
And then as I started experiencing life and you become an adult and you go through things and you have things happen and you get married, you have kids, you fall flat on your face at times. And
Yeah.
throughout all that, some of the experiences that I've been through, one of the things that really had a big impact on me out of high school was I had acne really, really bad. It's called cystic acne,
Hmm.
and had tried a lot of different things to fix that. Eventually did some cleanses, and within a couple of weeks all my skin problems were gone.
Wow.
And that was probably the first thing that I remember really sparking a passion with me. So to
That's
answer your question, it's for me finding that purpose and passion.
Yeah.
And for everybody that looks differently. That's not something that everybody doesn't find that when they're a child or a young adult. Some people, they go through their whole lifetime in search of that.
Yeah.
So for me, I've felt blessed that I've had that sense, and it's come into focus more. And my mom had always told me when I was going through the acne years ago, through middle school, high school, that God's got a plan for this. Something good will come out of it. And I didn't really believe it, like, okay, yeah, sounds good, mom, but nah, doesn't really fit. Doesn't really help that much in the moment. But
Yeah.
I'll be, I just turned 38 earlier this year, and so it's like, okay, she was right, all that wisdom, 20 years later, like, yep, she was right.
I know, right?
Um, and so, going through the accident and the financial struggles, going through the health challenges just with acne growing up, and being able to find solutions to that, and just um, finding natural medicine, which led me into personal development and like law of attraction and understanding a lot of principles there around subconscious, blockages, and then all that kind of stuff got me into bioenergetics. I'm certified in a few techniques with that I just love doing that.
Wow.
And then it goes really well with financial strategies. And, those things are what I've heard it. I'm trying to remember how I've heard it. Like basically the trials that you go through in life can basically spark the passions that you have, like the phoenix rising from ashes kind of thing. And it's definitely been for me. And I don't know if that fits that way for everybody, that the struggles you go through end up being the things that you need to learn yourself. And then you feel like I need to share this with other people. But
Yeah.
that's been my thing. So, how do I stay motivated? How do I stay doing this? For me, it's that internal drive that's always been there. I mean, it's nothing that I put there or I came up with. It's just, I feel like it's a God given purpose, not to get too spiritual about it, but that's just the way I see it. Like, I feel like we came here for a purpose. We're made to do something productive and have an impact in the world. And I
Yeah.
think, everybody needs to discover that. And maybe there's people that don't need to discover. Maybe that's not their purpose. I don't know. I can't speak for everybody, obviously. But I think anybody that's going to resonate with us talking about this stuff, they're probably looking for their purpose, or they've already found it and they're developing that whole thing. And so, for me, I think a few lessons along the way are, you're going to get off track. You're going to have failures. You're going to feel like not doing it.
Yeah.
You're going to want to give up. You're going to have really low lows. But I think in those lows, I always remember that pull, that fire that burns deep within. They're
Mm-hmm.
like, no, no, I still got to go after that. And
Yeah.
I think part of the thing that I've realized too is we have natural cycles, just like we have, the seasons on Earth. We have summer, spring, winter, fall. I
Mm-hmm.
think we all go through seasons, and we can have micro seasons inside of a more macro season. And there's failures, there's successes, there's moments where we're kind of in between things and like a void. There can be destructive things where things just seem to fall apart, and
Yeah.
it's easy in those moments to say like, oh, everything's falling apart, I'm going to give up. But when you understand the way that nature works, that when things fall apart, it's only so they can be rebuilt bigger. And so for me, it's when I do get off track, when you have the hard moments, you need to realize like, okay, I'm going around this cycle. And yes, it's a low point, but it's only because I'm going to have a new higher high. And then
Right.
the next low might even be a worse low than the one I just experienced, but it's because I'm going to get to another higher high. It
Yeah.
doesn't always work that way. Sometimes your high isn't quite as high, but if you zoom out, I think the highs are always bigger. You're on that trajectory of learning more. I think one of the other nuggets that I've taken away is there's always positive things out of every experience if you look for them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's gold nuggets there. There's lessons that can be learned that you can use to improve yourself. Whether that's in your business, just as yourself, your relationships, your health. I think there's always opportunities to seek better answers. I think about the years of acne. I was on search of finding solutions and answers, and sometimes you just have to look at it differently and ask different questions. Then you find results, and then when you find results, that really gives you a boost in your cycles of like, okay, you know, let's go. I'm seeing some success. I'm seeing the business grow. I'm making money. I'm planning for my retirement. I'm taking care of these things, and then that just kind of builds the momentum for all that. So yeah, that's just kind of what works for me, and I'm sure for other people it's different, but those are definitely some of the things that in my 38 years that I've learned and taken away from it. And just know it, have some grace with yourself. I'm saying that for me because I don't do that very much.
Me
My
too.
wife's always reminding me of have more grace with yourself, because it's easy as an entrepreneur to expect perfection, expect to grow your business, to not have any bumps along the way or failures. You're going to lose money. You're going to make stupid decisions. You're going to upset people. You're going to do those things, and just know that's part of it. And it's just there to make you better, I think.
No, yeah, so true. I resonate with that so well, and it's funny that you brought that up about like your mom telling you something like 20 years ago, and then it clicks because I feel like that's happened to me recently, uh,
Hmm.
where it's funny how like being on a journey on as an entrepreneur, you just look back on your journey and you're like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Like I went through that to get here. You know what I mean? Um, so it's super rewarding. Like finances aside, it's super rewarding to be an entrepreneur because of the person that you grow into. Um,
Mhm.
so I totally relate to that. Like you just when you're at your low, you still got that fire in you. Like it doesn't matter like what kind of low it is. It is what it is. I'm getting after it, you know. So
Mhm.
I totally resonate with that.
Absolutely. So cool. Anything else you want to chat about?
No, I feel like we've had such a great discussion. Like
Mhm.
I didn't expect it to be this long, but this was awesome. This was
Yeah.
really thank you for having me.
You bet. So, if anybody's listening and you resonate with Marissa, you are in the beauty industry or you're a young person, and you feel like maybe I need to be talked to in a way that's going to get me on track. Where can people find you, Marissa? And do you have content? You have a YouTube channel? I'd love to know. Share where people can get a hold of you and work with you if they want to, and they can learn from what you're learning.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm building my YouTube. Nothing's up there yet, but it's just my first and last name, Marissa Cozzolino. My Instagram is Marissa Lynn with 3 I's, and LinkedIn, Marissa Cozzolino, and my Facebook is Marissa Cozzolino Life Insurance Broker. So I definitely look forward to connecting with all of you soon.
Cool. Well, I'll have you give me those links when we get done here, and I'll post those with the live here. And yeah,
Definitely.
so cool. Well, thanks for joining me today, Marissa. It was a fun conversation. I always love getting with anybody from the Life 180 team because we always have great conversations. And I
Yes,
always love how well rounded they are. We're not just talking life insurance the whole time. It comes into the deeper parts of ourselves and the journey of life and how those things are interconnected. And I don't think I've had a conversation with anybody yet where we haven't gone into that because it's very hard to break those two things apart. So
for
thanks
sure.
for bringing your expertise and your great thoughts today and had a great
Okay.
conversation. So we'll talk to you later.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, everybody.